Well, those were all very powerful statements about advocacy. And, you know, really, I'm kind of humbled at what these doctors went up against to be able to bring social and health change in the community. So I'd like to ask each of you, in retrospect, looking back, what have you learned? What might you have done better to be more successful in the advocacy that you all have promulgated? Ayla, why don't you start, and we'll work this way, okay?
Okay, what have I learned and what I could have done better? What I learned is that when you're doing what's right, when you're passionate about it, when you have objective data to support the subjective narrative, you will go far. And you have to know your audience and know what they respond to. And fortunately, going through medical school and residency and fellowship, you learn how to interact with a lot of different audiences. And for me, being from Philadelphia and growing up in those communities, I understood and I could speak to them, to the people, but I could also speak to the people making the policies. And so I would say that everything you're learning here, don't keep it in the box of the operating room. We all have different skills and talents that we can spread. And as one of my mentors said, this isn't a dress rehearsal, right? So don't retire at 65 and say, man, I wish I had taken a trip to Honduras and helped some kids. If that's a passion and something you want, to go after it. So I don't know if I answered your question, Dr.
You did.
But,
you did.
Okay, thank you.
You did, but I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't address lessons learned, because as we go through many of these minefields to move this advocacy forward, there are lessons to be learned. And I think one of our responsibilities as professors, as leaders, is to ensure those lessons are memorialized so those behind us will have an easier path to move forward. So let's go on now. Marion, you have some insight for us.
So I think in terms of lessons learned, the first lesson is that you all have the voice and the experience and the ability to do this. When I first started, I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but we have the expertise, an expertise that is not shared by those who are in the position to make the laws and put things into action. And so they need to hear from us. And so it's just a matter of having confidence in that you know what you're talking about and that what you have experienced and have seen and have lived is a very critical piece that they need to hear. The second lesson learned, and I have to thank Pat Bailey, a pediatric surgeon and friend at the ACS for this, is that sometimes you have to control your passion about a topic and know how to address the issues and stay away from the third rail, and be thoughtful and smart about how you tackle problems. Have that plan A, B, C, and D so that when you go in and start a conversation one way and it's falling flat on its face, you can pivot and have the same conversation but maybe from a different angle. And I would say that is the second lesson. And the third lesson is that really this is a matter of building relationships, similar to what we do with the parents of our patients and our patients themselves. And you're not going to maybe have that impact on the first touch, but it requires that repeated contact, that development of a trusting relationship where you can have difficult conversations and slowly change mindsets.
Thank you. Thank you. Great insight. You know, the path to advocacy is a tough one. It's a battle. It's not easy and not for the faint-hearted, for sure. Liz?
Well, I'm still learning. I'm sure I have a lot more mistakes to make. And I have learned to be comfortable in the uncomfortable situations. And that also, I think, is where one of our strengths as pediatric surgeons lies. We hopefully, for the rest of my career, I will always be in the operating room and say, wow, I've never seen that before. And so I think that it's okay to make mistakes. That's something that I've had to learn. Some of the sensitive conversations that we really should be having with our patients to advocate and to make sure that they're safe and to educate them on what human trafficking looks like, to educate them on what is safe and unsafe behavior and who are the safe people. You're going to make mistakes having those conversations, and I encourage you to continue having those conversations. They're not easy. It's not easy to talk about child abuse, but we do that. And it's not easy to talk about sexual abuse, but we do that too. So it is difficult, but it's really important to have those relationships with your colleagues, the people at work, your nurses, the social workers. It's not just us as the rescuer. That rescue mentality can be prohibitive with advancement, and so it's excellent to sit with such a great group of people to learn the different levels of advocacy. We all work at different levels, and so I think it's strength in numbers.
Thank you, Liz. And what I draw from this and the experience is really that, advocacy is actually an exercise in empathy, because each of you are showing your heart. You saw something in your community that you fixed, and it wasn't in your job description. Nobody, forced you to do it, but you said, I must step forward and do something. And each and every one of you took risk to do that as well, because, they're often not only the headwinds that are slowing you down, but the political challenges and understanding what level of advocacy. Are you at a local level, are you state level, national level, global level? Where are the levers of power? How do you get to those levers of power? Is this going to be something that requires legislation? Is it going to be something that we can do administratively? Those are all of the important things that you have to think through, but without having the immense credibility that all of you have to be able to come forward, it's hard to move something like this forward. So I really not only commend you, but just applaud and thank you for what you've done, because you've each picked a significant void in society that was causing preventable economic and disease burden, and you've tackled it when everybody else addressed it in a politically correct way. They made excuses. They had reasons why they didn't want to respond. Advocacy expects, demands selfless dedication to the mission. And the inconvenient truth that you talk about, whether it's guns or trafficking, or other challenges, like Ayla did in Philadelphia, those are painful for people to deal with. But they are the truths that need to be exposed so we can move society to a better place. And in fact, it is the definition of leadership, because leaders are responsible for the destiny of others. You step up to that mantle, and you do that because it's the right thing to do. It's what we train our medical students and our residents to do. We are leading by example. Think about each and every one of the young men and women that you've trained over the years who see that model, and they want to be like you now. And the force multipliers that you're creating by putting them all out in the field. I think that's fantastic. Well, let's go to the town hall part. Let's get some questions. I think we have some both on chat and maybe some from the room. I think Peter's going to do some from the room. And Bindia, you have some on chat? No. None on chat? Okay.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut, actually, and for the first time, maybe. But I'd like to introduce the audience to the idea of advocacy by the fact that I want to tell you about my first instance of advocacy and why it went to become a little bit more. So I'm not really going to shut my mouth. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself.
I'm not surprised, Peter.
Yeah. So it was a patient also, and it was the idea of advocating for that child who died unnecessarily. And what I found is persistence pays off. But as all of you said, all of you pointed to the idea that we are relationship builders. And the capacity with which we do that is, as Ayla mentioned, predicated on the fact that this is what we've done. And for medical school and fellowship and residency, we are entrusted with taking a child from the emergency department to the operating room, having never met them before. And if we can do that, we can overcome the inertia in the political circles. I'm going to just stop there, but please, if anybody has questions, young residents, fellows, please, I see you. I'm going to come to the mic, but let's just have a conversation here. Go ahead.
Please.
I defer to you. So this is outstanding. Thank you all. Ed Barksdale, as you know, president. So I don't want to cast any shade. I want to really amplify advocacy. So I want to ask several of you, are you advocates or are you activists? And I want to make that distinction, one, because that's the theme that I established for the meeting: advocacy, activism, and leadership. And because, and Dr. Tracy and I have gotten into this, because, you know, I kind of think of advocacy, I used to think of it more on the activist side. Now I understand the distinction. So I'm just going to read from my favorite dictionary, which is just the internet. It says that activism is the policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. Now, are you advocates or activists? And please respond to that, because the language becomes important, because I want us to mobilize people who are not just speaking to legislators, but people who are deciding, gee, there's a pandemic and I'm a surgeon, I'm just going to go swab somebody's nose and stick a needle in their arm. That to me is activism. So I'm sorry I'm too loquacious about this, but I'd like each of you to comment on where advocacy ends, where activism begins, and whether you are advocates or activists. Thank you.
I mean, okay, so maybe I'm an activist a little bit.
It helps the meeting for me.
Okay, yeah, yes. I think sometimes when people think of an activist, they're thinking you're chaining yourself to a fence or you're burning something, and I think maybe that could be the reason why I haven't labeled myself that, but other people have. Again, because you want to invoke people in so they can be part of the change that you're trying to produce. But for me, I think you end up being more of an advocate when you can't personally do it. You end up being more of an activist when you have the power within yourself. And after I advocated for a long time with the hospitals where I was on staff, with FQHCs, with the state, and everyone was very empathetic. They understood what I was saying. And then I said, well, what are we going to do? They were like, well, it's just tough. I'm not sure. And then I just really sat down and said, okay, it's a disease. You need to be diagnosed so you don't spread to other people. And that starts with a test. And that's when the advocacy went to activism and leadership.
I would certainly label myself as both. And I think it's really important to be involved at all those levels, because we need to, one of my favorite sayings when I teach the curriculum on anti-human trafficking is that it's boots on the ground. We need to be involved with regards to the education that we give each other. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? We need to reevaluate that. We need to look at the benefits and the cons, because there's always, it can be difficult to appreciate that negative feedback, but I think that's just as important as the positive feedback. And we need to be involved at the national levels and policy making. We're looking at, one of the papers that we're looking at with one of our medical student research groups is resilience. And these are heavy conversations. And it takes, that's the vicarious trauma for us. And it takes its toll. And it shouldn't just rest on the physicians caring for patients. We have a whole hospital system that should work together with us and not against us. And so knowing what that research data looks like, and I agree, I think it always comes down to that data, Your negotiation skills are so much better when you are armed with that information, and being able to take it to that next level where it has the impact, I think is important, especially as surgeons. You know, we are leaders within our hospital systems, and we are influential with our patients and our local resources as well. So I think it's important to be both. And so I'm an advocate for my patients on a patient level, and for my, you know, with my colleagues. You know, people come to me for that question about human trafficking, and you guys are all welcome to as well. I mean, we need to be in this together, and it's a tough conversation.
So I just want to complete. You say you are an advocate and an activist.
Yes.
Together. So I want you to not call yourself either. I want you to call yourself a leader.
A leader, yes,
There you go.
absolutely.
Yes. And that's what I want to get to, because it is really, you know, what I want you to amplify is what all of you have done. You started out maybe as an advocate, or you started out chaining yourself to the fence, but what you are actually doing is that you're blazing a trail that many of us want to follow in the downdraft of what you do. And so as you speak as a leader, you get more to follow. I think, so I'm not challenging you. I want to amplify your vision for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Tracy?
Thank you. Listen, I think all of you, if you look at it, the sectors that you're all involved in are really great examples of either an internal passion, an obvious structural approach to advocacy, and then a situation that definitely, you know, was able to mobilize you. So what you're demonstrating to us is that there are so many different opportunities that you've taken, and I think that one of the things that APSA has done is that back in about 2006, under Dr. Donahoe, we tried to codify what our strategy was, and we wanted to have a national voice. And we didn't really know the best way forward, but we knew that there were advocates and there was advocacy that was internal. But we wanted to get external, and we wanted to build the partnerships that Rich alluded to and other things. So the real question is where is APSA now in its journey to having a national voice? And I'd love to hear your ideas about how you feel we've accomplished that, both on an individual level, or even sort of an opposite opinion, that it isn't that important to accomplish that we have such activity going on and we can stand proud of what we're working on. I mean, I look around the room and I see, you know, great leaders that have been able to be brought up. Max Langham's the chair of the Legislative Committee of the American College of Surgeons. I don't know that would have happened, Rich, many years ago, and it's just so different because we've kept at it and it's been intentional. But where do you all see APSA now in terms of having a national influence and being able to fulfill that strategic objective?
I'll field that one first. So I was overjoyed when NPR picked up that APSA sponsored a leader candidate for the ATF position. To finally see the national media recognizing our organization as speaking out on a major topic was fantastic. I think as a small organization, we have to partner with people like the ACS and the AAP, which are much larger, much more powerful, but we have a unique position as pediatric surgeons. We are pediatricians and surgeons, or surgeons and taking care of children, and we have a voice of our own that can be raised within those organizations, but we need to raise louder outside of that as well. And so I see us moving in that direction, and I think we need to keep moving even more in that direction. And I'd like to see APSA noted on many more issues in the future, like it has been just recently.
Who else? Melissa or Ayla?
So, yes, I see us more on a national level. I think over the last 2 years, because I made sure they always said pediatric surgeon every time I was introduced, And then people start to look that up, and there's a certain credibility to a pediatric surgeon. And not to say we went into the field for any of that, but it already gives you a platform that people pause to hear what you have to say. And being in a room now with policy and legislators and being one of the few physicians, when I speak, it's silent. And that, I mean, it's huge because it's like, that's what I finally wanted to get to, is to the federal level where it impacts everything from the state, the local, the hospital, the institutions, to the community. And of the regional directors, there's 2 doctors. Now, these are the people in charge of CMS or Center for Medicaid and Medicare and HRSA and SAMHSA and all these organizations. And there's only 2 people that are led by doctors, right? And so I bring a wealth of knowledge that, at least it's new, but they are embracing and they've asked me to be a part of. And so if you're interested at all, I would encourage you to pursue it, because they need more of us in those spaces. Because sometimes the policies are great on paper, the legislation is great in the model they've come up with, but how you actually implement it in a hospital and in a community, that's where the disconnect is, because people are so far removed from what's actually happening and what we're doing every day. And so I love it. I mean, I don't know how long, well, at least while Biden is in office, and then we'll see what happens after that. But yes, Dr. Tracy, APSA and pediatric surgeons are here in this space.
Great answers, great insight. You know, the advocacy of APSA is extraordinary, just watching it from the outside. Being a surgeon myself in critical care and trauma, but seeing what you all have accomplished in a relatively short time is really spectacular. And I think as your credibility grows and your understanding of the complexity of society and what you can contribute is important, the problem then is going to be triage. Which issues are you going to take on? And what is it that you're going to direct at those issues? So I think it's a good problem to have, you know, because you're more and more recognized for coming to the table very credibly to articulate something that other people don't want to touch because it's inconvenient or politically not wise to do. And yet, we're not politicians. You know, we'll tell it straight as it is because we're surgeons. So I think those are fantastic answers. And as I said, I think that, I hope and I think that based on what you've done already, you'll continue to grow. And although a small organization, you will have a disproportionate impact on society because of who you are and the credibility you bring to the table. Other questions? Sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cora. I'm Max Langham. I just got shouted out here, so I figured I'd better stand up. And I want to do a couple of things. I want to thank Ed Barksdale for the concept, the advocacy, activism, leadership, triad, the thoughtful language is super important. I want to thank each of you for everything you've done, for being here, and I want to thank the organized committee for giving us a chance to have a conversation. Because when I started working with advocacy, it was around access to care for children, underserved children who needed liver transplants in the state of Florida. And I was mentored in that and learned about it. And I have evolved in my thinking, and I think at some level what each of you are doing is changing behavior of your fellow human beings, which is really hard to do. And a lot of times we think about advocacy as passing laws. The problem is that if you don't change belief and behaviors, passing laws can be weaponized against people you're trying to help. For instance, the group of folks who are most impacted by gun laws are young black men. And if you make it a mandatory sentence to commit a crime with a gun, the people who are going to be impacted in that are disproportionately African American men. And we've got a huge problem with that already. So as we come to thinking about what we advocate for, what we are activists about, and how we are leaders, I think that the older I get and the longer I've been in here, the more important diversity and equity become part of that language. And I would really enjoy hearing conversations about how we who have a responsibility in the advocacy space, in the legislative space, bring to our work a more nuanced understanding of what the real problems are and what the impact of the solutions that we're proposing have on those members of our society that we're actually trying to help. So any ideas you folks have about that would be really appreciated. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the question. I think we're running low on time. I think we've got looks like three questions at the mic, so perhaps, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. My name is Alyssa Pease. Thank you for, well, I'm from Colorado. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm wondering if you can tell us more about the strategies that you use to allocate time for this work amongst your everyday responsibilities of being a clinician and researcher and all of the above. I think in my experience, you can make a whole career just out of these efforts, and it's often something we have to do after hours. So I'm wondering if you're able to negotiate this when you start a new job, or how you've been able to do that.
That's a great question. I think
That's
you
a
all
great-
are impacted by that, so I mean.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to
Yeah.
answer that for you really quickly. Get your training, get your certification, get your board certification, get your license, get your patient following, let the pediatricians know you and trust you, establish yourself in the community, hone your skills first. You have to put that investment in you first. With that, head down, getting work done, taking care of your patients will come the credibility first. And I know, especially the young ones are like, I gotta do it now. You will do it best with more credibility. With that comes validation. So you invest in you first. The problems aren't going anywhere. You want something to do on a weekend? Volunteer, spend 4 to 8 hours doing something with an organization. But you put all the time in you first, and then when you're ready, you can take a job in the government making half as much as what you make as a pediatric surgeon, and it's okay because you're passionate about what you're doing, and I've already been doing it for 25 years.
Drop the mic on that one.
I will also say on a sort of practical level, as an academic surgeon, this is what I am valued for in terms of my academic time. So in our practice, everybody is a certain percent clinical and a certain percent academic. And this is what I was recruited for, and what I am judged on academically is what I do as an advocate and an activist. We strongly in our institution believe in not a tripartite, but a quadripartite mission of academic surgery that involves the social accountability, social responsibility, social advocacy piece. And so this is what I am expected to be able to report back to my division chief and my department chair as to what am I doing that gains me my academic credit. And that's what I was able to negotiate for, and why I'm in the role I'm in where I am, because it was what I was going to be valued for. There are more and more academic centers that are starting to value this work. So it's not everywhere, but there are places out there, and I would encourage those who are interested to look for those places.
And I agree with everything that has been said so far. I think you need to focus on what your passions are and what's your why. So what's your mission? And I think one of my interests was developing skills as a woman leader. And so I joined AMWA, and when I was a resident, American Medical Women's Association. And as a resident, I started becoming involved as an activist and an advocate, and then later developed the skills to be a leader in the work that I do, just because it resonates with me, and ask these questions. And then I went to, as a pediatric surgeon, I went to APSA, and I listened to Dr. Herschel saying, yeah, advocacy is important. We need to do this. And I was like, oh, okay, because I felt so out of place as a surgeon. I'm warm and fuzzy, but I'm still a surgeon. And, you know, then other people say, yeah, I like what you're doing, and why are you involved? And wow, you're a pediatric surgeon. Can you give us a talk in our pediatric clinic? And so you start making other connections and relationships with other people. So it's what you feel is comfortable. I don't watch a lot of TV. That's not my priority. My priority is my family, my job, and my activist leadership work. So it really depends on what's your why, and that's part of my why, is why I do what I do.
Thank you, thank you. Let's see if we can get through a couple of these questions quickly. We'll start over there at the left side.
Well,
Thank you.
First of all, Mike Leanwan, Kalamazoo, Michigan, I want to thank you. I'm in awe here and of Dr. Legum and Peter, and it's just wonderful, and thanks for setting such a good example for all of us. I just wanted to add one little thing in the human trafficking, and you were saying, well, these are things we can start tomorrow, and I saw a little thing on the news about a hand signal that we can all watch for, and I didn't know if everyone in the room knew it, so I thought I'd pass that along. But if you ever see someone put their thumb here and then close their hand, that's a signal that they're being abducted or they have been abducted. And I actually went to teach my girls this, and they said that they already saw that on TikTok. But I thought it would be good if you haven't seen that in this room, that we should pass that along, because that's sort of an immediate thing that we can all glean. But thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the comment. Ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, Ruth from UCSF. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This is a longer question than maybe the time allots, but really quickly, I was wondering what helped you go from, you know, having the data, having the subjective narrative, to generating solutions to the problems you were seeing?
Jump in.
I have a short answer, just get involved.
Well, I have a longer answer, but the short answer is we need people doing the research. So, you know, gun violence is my area, and we haven't had the answers. But now that research is being funded more, we're starting to know what are the root causes and what are some of the solutions that actually work, and being able to bring forward that research to help educate and inform our political decisions, and our legislative actions are very important.
The research and data for health disparities has been around longer than I've been living, and so this was an opportunity in an acute situation to provide a solution.
Excellent, excellent. Doctors?
Yeah, hi, Jose Prince from New York, from Cohen Children's. Are we organized the right way? When you think about each of your domains and what we're trying to accomplish, I ask this because I have the privilege of being an executive sponsor for a corporate firearm safety, gun violence prevention program. When we think about our clinical problems, more and more we shift to disease-based multidisciplinary teams, whether it's, as Dr. Tracy alluded to, our specific society, or all the different aspects that are trying to tackle each of your problems. And I think of great civil rights movements, the organizational structure. Are we organized the right way? And each of you in your domain, do you have thoughts about how we should be organized differently or better to be more effective on a larger scale?
Thoughts?
It's not an easy question, but maybe it's for the group.
I think it's an important point. I'll make a quick comment just as an outsider, is that what I see here is individuals who are passionate, competent, compassionate, empathetic, who want to make a change. If we rise up to the next level, what's the organizational structure that can best exemplify that and democratize it? And that's probably a good discussion to have within APSA, because as I said earlier, as you're more and more known as being successful advocates, there are going to be more people coming saying, help us change this, make the world a better place, save our children, whatever it is. So having an organizational structure that can filter that information, and then you'll have infinite needs and finite resources. How do you triage to deal with the things that are most important to you and to APSA in that regard? So I think it's a very pertinent question. I ask my colleagues, any other comments?
I'll say that I think we are at the precipice of better organization. where we are breaking out of our silos, approaching some of these huge problems, because they are huge problems, and we are seeing more collaboratives like your organization has. But I think we need to go even broader, because the impact, each problem has so many underlying problems that are leading to it, and we need to have much more in the way of multidisciplinary, collaborative approaches that really get at the root problems, not the end stream effects. And so, but I think we can do that, and I think we're on the verge of finding ways that we as APSA can participate in that with other organizations, groups that are not just medical. So we need to break outside of even the medical realm and get into, you know, the justice realm, the social work realm. There's so many different areas, but I think we're right on the verge of sort of pushing that. You know, I see it coming, I see it starting to happen on smaller levels, and I think we're about to see it on larger levels.
Quick comment on that. I think that if you look at the business world, you look at the social literature that's evolving as well, what we do know is that organizations that exemplify diversity in gender, ethnicity, and competency do better. Their outcomes are always better, no matter what your metric is.
Just sort of as a final comment, and with that would be that everyone recognize that we can all do something with equity. You don't have to be a person of color. You don't have to be part of the LGBTQ community. You don't have to be a woman. You can just, if you're breathing, you can do something about health equity. It may be in the trainees that you look at. It may be in protecting your staff and folks when they have something that they encounter in the workplace, and supporting them, like, you know, getting put out of a room because of the color of your skin. I mean, these are real things that you can do, and there are larger things that you may not be able to do on a state or federal level, but there's something we can all do towards equity. It's like asking the question when your patient keeps not showing up for an appointment, do you need, you know, money to get the bus? Do you need later hours so that you can make your appointment? Do you need a weekend? It's just asking the next question, and that's how we mitigate the health disparities, and we can all do that. It doesn't have to be, you know, someone who's black. It can be just us.
Peter, last comment, and then I'll close it out.
Just quickly, as Max raised, the approach is important.
Yeah.
But the realization that people are watching is right here, right? We have somebody who's appointed to the federal level from a pediatric surgical organization. We have another person who's won the Arthur Ellenberger Award from a pediatric surgical organization. Who are those people who are awarding the Ellenberger Award? That's the ACS's Legislative Advocacy Award. We have a funded CDC grant writer on stage from a pediatric surgical organization. These are important. And there's another pediatric surgeon who's funded by the NIH now. This is important. People are watching. This is our moment as our organization grows to make a statement. And I'm so glad that the 5 of you on stage, and Rich, by the way, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Peter. And let me just make I think it's fantastic. As pointed out, a small organization has done some very big things and continues to have an impact across the nation and the world with what you're doing. You know, a wise man once said, if you don't stand for something, you may fall for anything. And we stand for something here. We stand for the people that we have the privilege to be their leader, as was said. This goes beyond advocacy and activism. This is about being leaders. This is about addressing the problems of society with very credible people to bring about this change. And I want to remind you of something else that Peter just summarized, the great movement that has happened from some of your very members here. But I want to go back to Chick Coop. Think about late 60s and early 70s and going into the 80s, and you think about what he did when nobody spoke about advocacy. You think there was a pediatric surgeon that stood up and said, no, this is an infectious disease. Do not listen to these people who are telling you otherwise. And he had to figure out ways, and an innovative way, to connect to the people because they cut his budget. They didn't want him talking on TV because that was politically incorrect. You don't say those things. You know what he did? He figured out ways to put mailings into stuff that the federal government was saying out, and he got in trouble for that. But so I think he kind of felt sorry for me when I got the job, to be honest with you, because he said, son, you don't know what you're getting into. But he became my mentor, and I spoke to him many times. And he empowered me. He inspired me. And he talked about the immense privilege we have as surgeons. And he said, you know what's interesting, Rich? Now we have 2 surgeons that have been Surgeon General. And he was very proud of that. And so he said to me, you know, they picked me for the wrong reason. He said, you know, people know me because I'm a pediatric surgeon and I did great things because I love my children, I want to care for them. He said, but they picked me, the politicians, because they knew my family was very conservative, that I was a Mennonite. He said, but they misread me. Because my allegiance is not to conservatism or liberalism. My allegiance is to the people and to always speak truth to power, however inconvenient it may be. So there's a legacy from one of your members going back decades who set the foundation and the standards for all of us to follow. We walk in his shadows, we stand on his shoulders today to make this world a better place with the tools, the knowledge, the passion, the empathy, the compassion we've been given. And I would say, if you look at advocates in history, Chick Coop would be up there, maybe at the top, because he was willing to sacrifice his position, his credibility as Surgeon General of the United States to speak that truth to power when it was very inconvenient. So I applaud our doctors up here who are willing to do the same thing. Again, I'm not saying that, you know, start throwing grenades or break glass, but don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. Stay in the fight totally, because the people are depending on us. It's about leadership, and leaders, no matter what the scope or scale, are responsible for the destiny of others. Even if you're in a small practice in the middle of nowhere, or you're a professor at some big university, your words matter. Your values, your characteristics matter. Collectively, together under APSA, you can do great things and continue to do great things. So I'm humbled, I'm privileged to be here today to see many of my old friends. I've been reminded of how old I am now because some of my medical students and interns are now professors and retiring that are in your organization. So I'm still thrilled to be here. So I will ask Joanne, will you close us out then, Joanne? And thank you for allowing me the privilege to be with you.